Dr. Denzel Waters here, Restoration Doctor, coming today to begin a entirely new series of broadcasts. We're still working with the 8As, still working with the 8As. Remember those 8As, we've got a set of music that is working with them. The 8As are awareness, acceptance, assurance, adoration. Those are the first four. And then the last four, association, assignment, accountability, and assimilation. So the 8As, we're still working with them here and then. This is called awareness and vision. Awareness and vision. I'm going to work with this in regard to what we're doing here now. We've got a few things that we're working with. We have the first 8As. Initially, we were working from the standpoint that 8As was working with individuals who had actually been traumatized. We initially called it being helped to recover from physical sexual abuse prior to the age of puberty. And we work with that. We still work with individuals who had that experience, and we've done seminars in regard to that, helped a great number of individuals in regard to that. Of late, I've gone through a process in which it has expanded. The Spirit has just worked with me in regard to this, and so what we're doing now is that we've tied it into two very real theories. And what we're doing with it is that we're taking it, and in the realm of just this whole aspect of working with individuals in various settings. So we've tied it to the theories of the hero's journey, and we've talked about it previously in regard to a few movies, and we've developed what has been called the Awareness of Awareness Survey. You may have taken that. If not, just get in contact with us. You can send us an email at info@iwillrestore.org or info@iwillrestore.com. We can send you the survey. It's called Awareness of Awareness Survey. And the 8As, you may be familiar with the fact that 8, when you're working with the number 8, the octave is what is a 8 scales, 8 different scales. Like when you're playing music or when you sing do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, the first and the last are the same thing. And so when we're working with that, the 8As is like that as well. And then when you work with the week, we also have 7 days, and then there's an 8th day, which we call Sunday, that the 8th day and the first day is the same day, so to speak. What you're working with there is that you begin on Sunday, and you go all the way through 7 days, and then you begin on Sunday, and you go all the way through the 7 days. So the first day and the 7th day, basically, the 8th day, the first day and the 7 days follow, and then the 8th day is the beginning all over again. And there's something really special about the first and the 7th day. You get a vision on the first day. That's what the week is going to be about. The week ends on the 7th day. That's called the day of rest or the Sabbath. And then you begin again on the 8th day. And what you had not completed on the first 7 days, you then begin again, so to speak, on the 8th day. That's something very powerful that we'll talk about later. So we're working with that, and in the hero's journey, the same thing occurs, actually, in regard to that. There's what is called the monomyth, which was done by an individual whose name is Joseph Campbell. The monomyth talked about how people all over the world, at the time that he studied with Carl Jung, that he was working with the aspect of that there were stories that were being told, and they were similar. And they were similar all over the world. So people were basically telling the same structured story all over the world. But the truth of the matter is that you can see that in movies today to a great degree. A lot of movies, and now that everybody knows about it, or many people know about the hero's journey structure, they have now begun to change it up a bit and to do various things with it so that it doesn't look the same. You just say, I see the same movie over and over again. But the basic structure is still the same. There were a certain number of steps that were involved in each movie. You can see a movie like Star Wars, which had a number of different series that they did. And you can see that movie and you can actually study and you can understand that that movie is based on the hero taking a certain number of steps. Goes through a certain process. And then there are other movies that are the same kind of thing as well. But it just helped individuals to actually look at it and be able to follow along and understand what is taking place. And so that's what we've done. We've tied it into the 8 A's, into the hero's journey. And one of the first places that I did that, I've done it with a number of things, from the Wizard of Oz. I've done it with Star Wars, as I've mentioned. I also did it with the Black Panther, which came out when it first came out, and also the second one as well. I've done it so that the 8 A's are lined up, and so we have awareness, which is the first A, and I tied that to the aspect of the individual who was the protagonist, as it's called. The protagonist in the hero's journey, there is a call to adventure. In the 8 A's, there is awareness. The call to adventure was when the individual who was a protagonist, the star, so to speak, of the show, and there are many stars in these various movies, but that individual starts out in what is called the ordinary world. In Star Wars, that was Luke Skywalker, and he was on that planet where he was a farmer, basically, who went out every now and then and shot at little small animals that were on that planet. And then one day there was a call to adventure, which is when he found R2-D2. And so then he met Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so initially, when he has a call, he says, I don't want it. That's called rejecting. Rather than rejecting, I have accepting. And so that's the same thing that we're talking about here. So go down and you tie those things together. There's another theory I applied it to also. It's called transformative learning theory. That's an adult learning theory. It says that adults learn differently than children do. And that's the truth. Why? Because they already have a body of knowledge. And so when you're working with adults, which is what I am, which is what you are, perhaps, in regard to that, when you're working with them, they learn differently. You have to take into account the fact that they already have a body of knowledge that they are working with. And so when an adult learns, it's normally because of what is called a critical incident, which is the same as, according to the way that I'm looking at it, is the same as the aspect of the hero's journey. There's some kind of event in the hero's journey. It could be loss. It could be, in this case of Luke Skywalker, you remember that there have been an event, both in the Star, so to speak, when Darth Vader and his individuals intercepted the transport of the princess. And so there's an event. But there had been previous events that had occurred in the life of Luke Skywalker as well. And then in the next iteration of that, where you have Rey, there had also been events, sometimes tragic events that had occurred. And so in transformative learning theory, that is called a critical incident. And so it's a critical incident. So it's the same thing. And so with me, in the 8 A's, I call it awareness. And so we can also move with awareness to the aspect of you're looking at something and you have a vision. You have a vision. So rather than looking at something that is, so to speak, could be considered a negative, you're moving toward a goal. You're moving toward a dream. You're moving toward something that is positive, and you have a vision of the future. You're moving toward it. And so the whole aspect is that there's something ahead of you that you're moving toward, as opposed to something that is behind you that you're moving away from. So the vision is pulling you forward so that you are becoming what is ahead of you. So stay with me in regard to that and understand what is taking place. So, let me do, because of the fact that I've been a minister for nearly 40 plus years in regard to this, because it becomes important here in regard to this whole aspect of this awareness piece and what we're working with, the awareness of vision. There's one famous industrial organizational psychology is one of the fields that I've studied as well, and where I developed some of this some of this whole aspect of what I'm talking about here. Again, they expanded the whole idea of the 8 A's. The aspect is that she called vision, this lady named Margaret Wheatley, I believe her name was, she said vision was a field. Vision was a field. And what she was talking about was that the power of having a vision and how there's an energy field that is drawing people forward to that energy field. And so the aspect is pulling, like in a set of movies and then also television programs called Star Trek. They had what was called a tractor beam, where it drew individuals into the Starship Enterprise. So vision is a field, and so it's drawing you. And then there is, of course, the law of attraction that basically says the same thing, is that when you have a vision, an overwhelming vision, something that pulls you forward into itself and pulls all the resources into that particular vision so they all come together at the right time, then that vision is a field. It's an energy field. There's another individual who calls it an ocean of devotion. It's the same idea that we're working with here in regard to that. So that's the 8 A's that we're talking about. And what we're seeking to do is help individuals come up with a positive idea that they're moving toward. And one of the ways that we've talked about it is that we talk about becoming one's authentic self. So we're not trying to run away from sin, so to speak. We're not trying to run away from the devil, if you want. We're not trying to run away all the time from something that is negative. What we're seeking to do is to become more and more our authentic self, who we were destined to be before the foundation of the world. There are texts in the Bible, by the way, that go with this idea. There are texts that go with this. There are texts that actually align to the fact of this idea that I've just mentioned. One of them is found in the book of Psalms, the 139th division, where David talks about the aspect that before he had lived one day in his life, all the days of his life had already been written in a book. All the days of his life. You remember there's another text where it makes it very clear that before we call, God has already answered. So God doesn't think up the answer once we call out to God. That does not happen. God would not be God. He would not be omnipresent. He would not be omniscient. He would not be omnipotent if he had to think of an answer when we finally prayed. God is not, we are not waiting on God. God is waiting on us to move to the point of awareness and understanding and consciousness that we are in need of him, in need of God. And so that's what is taking place. This is the 8 A's that we're talking about, and it's an awareness. It's an awareness. There are some that have in mind that our greatest sin is our ignorance of who we are and of who God is. And so it is the 8 A's that we're talking about. And so awareness is the first A. It is like waking up to a new vision of life that is moving one forward. And so even if you're listening to this now, it has to do with the aspect that you have been brought here, you have been led, you have been guided by Spirit to arrive at this particular point where you're listening to this particular broadcast, because I myself feel that I have been brought to this particular point, step by step by step around to this particular point, that there's a vision that I'm following. Indeed, I feel that I have been led by this vision all of my life. I don't know about you, but there have been places where I've made one decision that I'm going to say do step 1, but when it came to step 2, it wasn't my decision. It seemed that that decision had actually been made for me. And so I just went along with step 1. I thought I was in charge, but then step 2 seemed to have been laid out beforehand. And so was step 3 and step 4, and I had to do step 5 and everything else in regard to this. And so all of these things, as they have played themselves out and everything like that, it has become something that is just amazing to me. So hopefully you are working with me in regard to what we're talking about here. We're talking about the 8 A's that we're working with as we go forward in regard to what we are doing and what we're working with. And so as we look at it, I want you to just stay with this idea that we're working with this 8 A's. And the first A is this aspect of awareness that we're working with in regard to this. Listen to again this awareness, this vision, and think of your own vision. Here we go again. And so one of the things that we're working with in regard to this, we've posted these items, awareness, vision, and the other musical items that we have that go along with the various 8 A's. We've posted them on SoundCloud so that you hopefully have heard them already. The difference here is that we're working with them from the standpoint of placing the words, which is my part in it, so to speak. I definitely didn't do the music. That's not my gift. But placing the words now to go in regard to what we're doing for this particular presentation and everything like that. And so we're working with, again, the awareness. And awareness, we've set that to say that we're working with being awakened. Awareness, being awakened. Something new comes into view. Something new comes into view. And we call our 8 A's the 8 A's of transformation. The 8 A's of transformation. I want to leave this here now and come back and do what I mean by transformation, the 8 A's of transformation, and just talk about awareness a little bit more. So for now, let me stop. All right? Blessings to you.